at some of the meetings before. Favorite class.
Okay, we have hit the magical time. Everybody welcome here. I'm Taylor Sharp. This is the FileMaker Pro User Group of Dallas, Texas. We're here at the Harmonic Dallas studios, not the treehouse this time, but one of their other studio rooms here. We're actually in various rooms throughout the little complex here. So this is kind of fun and hopefully going to foster some new ways of hopefully carrying on the conversations here. So starting out with PUG announcements. Let's see. I think Paul's over at the what's the developer group over in Germany. So we're missing out on that. I'm kind of jealous didn't get to go. But as far as FileMaker announcements, I guess everybody should know since last month we've got the FileMaker 20 or FileMaker 2023, whatever you want to call it, is out. If you haven't jumped on that bandwagon or heard about that, that's kind of the latest news on getting things updated. We haven't heard any new news on Engage for next February other than the date. So I was hoping by now we'd hear some things like announcements on speakers or things like that, or who wants to sponsor it. And I haven't heard anything unless, I don't know, Fred, you heard anything?
No.
Greg, you hear anything on that, the FileMaker Claire?
No whispers, no nothing. My guess is it's probably going to be late summer before we hear anything about that, based on how it's usually about 6 months ahead, right?
Okay, well, I will say that I look forward to that. I will also comment, I looked at some other presentations last month about FileMaker 2023, where we had the developer group from Claire speak to us. And actually, if you compared what they did in our user group presentation to what they did with like the SBA and some of the other presentations they actually did a better job for us than they did for us.
I noticed that too.
I'm like, okay, score PUG Dallas. So anyway, that certainly is fun. So, but let's see, are there any other announcements before we move on to our presentations here? Greg, Dennis?
I would just say that about housing, it's doubtful that there will be any new hotels built between now and then. So we're going to be spread out in the neighborhood there, the number of smaller properties.
Right. There's no one hotel that can hold everybody there. So whatever we do, we will not be in one destination hotel like in the past.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to designate one place as a headquarters for, social gatherings or something like that.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting.
There's always the possibility that they'll set up a bunch of tents in the warehouse.
2024.
It is Austin.
Engage.
Engage, the next developers conference.
There are a lot of people, out in tents in Austin. So
It's an adventure.
So it's all tentative then.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just as an
Dad
idea,
joke.
if a number of people rented motorhomes and used the Apple parking lot, it could be a, like a big tailgate event.
There we go. Okay. Well,
So
I think
what you're saying is we all need to go buy mobile homes before this happens.
No, we rent a FMPUG party bus, man.
Oh, margarita machine and all.
Disc jockey, bar.
Okay,
Why not?
Well, let's get things kicked off here. I think that covers the announcements. We have today, Steve Sykora is going to give us a presentation, and we're going to talk all about various things in the artificial intelligence world and how it might relate to FileMaker. And it'll be interesting to see where this conversation goes. So let's make sure we got Steve on focus here. So let me pin Steve up here. And for those of you who don't know Steve, I'll tell you he's one of the most interesting, creative, and thoughtful FileMaker developer guys out there. He likes to delve deep into things and leave me wondering a lot of times after I've had a conversation with him. So I'm sure that will happen today too. So Steve, without further ado, you're up.
all right. Thanks, Taylor. That sounds
sounds like a tall set of shoes to fill. So first of all, let's just make sure that everyone can see my kind of lead slide there.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. And I am going to get my grid of people as functional as possible. Working with a kind of a multi-monitor situation here. And for first part of this, I'm going to change my camera view. All right. So, generative AI and FileMaker. Appreciated that glowing introduction from Taylor. I will do my best to somewhat live up to it. But a lot of that, as you are going to see, is dependent on all of the other smart people on this call here. Yeah, my name's Steve Sykora, president of Harmonic, and I also lead our business practices team. And I think that as you'll see with this particular conversation, that's kind of the angle I'm taking here with this conversation. Taylor announced that I was speaking earlier this week with a very precise topic forthcoming. So this is the topic that is forthcoming. And honestly, I thought as far back as a month ago, hey, you know what I really want to talk about is AI and FileMaker, and mostly because I feel like I don't know as much as I want to know about AI and FileMaker. You know, whenever I have that kind of nagging, it feels like something should be there. We should be trying something. There should be an easier way, right? That's usually a sign to me that what I should do is put a deadline on my calendar and give a presentation about it, because by that point, you know, maybe I'll have learned something. So I did that, and then I had a really busy month. So I was at a customer's site last week, and they said to me, a new customer, hey, what do you think about all this generative AI? I mean, is the hype real? Are you guys using that? Where are you using that? I was kind of flat-footed in my answer. I don't like to be flat-footed when people ask me questions. And so we are here today together to answer that question. So I want to have a conversation. I want to try to do this a little bit differently. We've never tried to do anything like this. We've got the luxury of some nice technology, and we've got a bunch of smart people in the house local, and we've got a bunch of smart people remote, some of my team and a lot of friends. So first of all, Quintet A in my room. I've got 4 of my coworkers with me, so 5 of us in here. Taylor, there's still an opening for a viola player in his room, it looks like. So, you know, if somebody wants to go join Quintet B, that's going to be Taylor's room. My daughter Lynette is holding down the symphony in the conference room, and some more employees and guests there. And then, of course, we've got a bunch of you in the antiphon area helping out and participating via remote on Ring Central. So logistically, how are we going to do this? Ideally, what you would do is raise your hand so we can kind of coordinate the flow. When we get to the conversational part, I'm going to be taking notes and prompting questions for discussion. I think we'll find that our time is going to fly by faster than we'd like. So try to raise your hand either physically or digitally if you want to prompt an answer or ask a question. I'll try to manage that flow. Taylor will in his room, Lynette will in her room, and those of you who are remote, you can use the hand raise deal on Ring Central. State your name. I'd like to write it by your comment or thought, if possible, and be as succinct as possible, because we've got a lot to get through in a relatively short amount of time. So what I want to do is just start with a bit of a level setting presentation here. And this is not me speaking as an expert. This is me speaking this is my understanding of what we're talking about right now. And so that we're kind of talking about the same thing. AI as a topic, of course, is enormous. And even AI and FileMaker or AI and software, I mean, it's still an enormous topic, right? So I want to narrow the scope down a little bit so that we can hopefully have a productive conversation. So AI is inevitable, is it? We've been talking about artificial intelligences as a race for a very, very, very long time, right? For decades and decades, and research into it goes back more than half a century. Anymore, AI is driven by sort of unavoidable constructs, significant corporate money and effort, significant government interest. Humanity is constantly in the process of trying to build a better mousetrap or play God, or, you know, depending on your philosophical bent, there's any number of ways we can look at this. And I think AI may not at one point have been inevitable, but I think at the moment it's hard to argue that it's not inevitable based on where we are. AI is useful. Well, maybe. AI has started to crop up in places to try to make our lives more simple. Apple embeds a lot of AI into iOS. I'm a motorcycle rider, and I live kind of by where the green dot is there in the lower part of the map in Richardson, here in the Dallas area. And my local Kawasaki dealer is up in Plano, and I visited that 3 weekends in a row for a couple of reasons. You know, I had to get my bike inspected and so forth. And the fourth weekend, I was headed somewhere with my wife in the car, and somehow it knew that I was headed to the motorcycle dealer. How did it know that, right? Like, I definitely didn't tell it, but it recognized a pattern. Hey, it's Saturday. You're headed east on Beltline. You must be headed to the motorcycle shop. Well, yeah, that would have been helpful if I was. I actually wasn't. So my thought was, yeah, you know, you're so silly, AI. That's not right. That's not right. But it is kind of everywhere, and it is more and more everywhere all the time, right? In self-driving algorithms, in shopping and commercial enterprise mechanisms, in our mobile devices, deeply embedded. So in my mind, and I actually looked for some kind of types of AI before I gave this presentation, and I didn't really find anything I liked, to be honest, because when you type in types of AI, you end up very quickly in very nerdy white papers about things that are A, over my head, and B, not particularly relevant to my attempt to kind of bucket AI into useful constructs. So I decided to come up with my own 3 types of AI as I think about them right now. And the first type in my mind is embedded AI, right? So this is things like maps algorithms and prompting algorithms for apps on your phone. You know, which one might you want to use? Things of that nature, right? Where tool makers have decided that they can add usefulness to their devices by embedding certain AI algorithms and sort of help us do the right thing more easily. So there's embedded AI, and that will obviously continue to expand. There's also processing AI, right? There's lots and lots of AI built to kind of help do things, often trained by very specific or proprietary ML models for a given purpose, and very expensive to build. You know, one of our customers replaced a system that we built with a with a custom trained ML model. It took them a lot of years to do it and a lot of tries and a lot of wrong turns, but they eventually did it. And at some point, it became more efficient than the thing that we had built. But newer, there's other kinds of processing AI, and it's kind of a mashup where we're starting to see Microsoft, for instance, who's invested heavily in OpenAI, the company, and they've started integrating that into their tools, right? So I can now go to Bing, and Bing as a search engine will use the large language model mechanisms that OpenAI has built to refine what it's telling me. There's a new version of Teams out that uses some of the same processing AI technology to try and make the transcripts more useful. And boy, howdy, wouldn't it be useful to have more useful transcripts on interactions like this. So that kind of brings us to the third bucket of things, and really the one I want to talk about today, and that is generative AI. So generative AI is we're going to come back to this in a second, but it's the one that sounds kind of human, right? It uses the right words, so we believe it. But that's kind of scary. And of course, when we talk about tongue-in-cheek, or maybe not so tongue-in-cheek, our future robot overlords, part of what's scary about that is the uncanny nature of some of how AI acts, given that we train it with human-driven models. Just yesterday, a story hit the news about military drone simulation where the AI decided to kill its operator. Now, let me be clear, this was a simulation, right? It's not real life. Just be careful, don't just read the headline. But the story is that they built an AI model, and they gave it points, and so the AI scored points for killing SAM sites, killing surface-to-air missile sites. But the operator had the final say on whether it made the kill or not. So the AI didn't like that because the operator was controlling its ability to win, so it decided to kill the operator, right? It's logical. Well, that was maybe a little bit too simplistic, right? So they updated the programming to say, now, wait a minute, you're going to lose points if you kill the operator. Bad AI, don't kill the operator. So the AI was clever. What it decided to do is to kill the control tower that the operator was using to tell the AI whether or not to kill the SAM site, right? So, clearly, this is a broad and deeply complicated and important conversation, right? AI, autonomy, ethics, there's a lot of interesting stuff there. And it's a complicated and interesting philosophical conversation. But I don't want to talk about that today because that's well beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. And most of us, at least, aren't faced with writing AI for drones, I think. At least nobody on my team, I believe. So where are we? I think we're here. I think that AI is good enough that it, without a doubt, will impact the next years of our lives in ways that we can only begin to imagine. And I don't mean years like, our children. I mean years like now. It is happening, and the real kind of recent leap that we've seen is in this generative AI space, right? There's been this worldwide explosion of interest since ChatGPT was released to the public nearly in November of last year. It's already, in the first 6 months, they already had over 1 billion unique users, not uses, users, right? Think about that. That's a notable minority of the world's population. DALL-E 2, which is a play on Salvador Dali's name, and Wall-E the robot is an image generation generative AI that has started to win art contests and things of that nature, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on, and it seems to be progressing at an exceptionally rapid pace as computing power gets cheaper, as these models, as companies can afford to fund these models to consume the entirety of the internet and learn things and do things. So why does that matter? How can it be leveraged with FileMaker? When I think about generative AI, I am both excited by it as a concept and discomforted by it, because really what generative AI is it's AI that takes a small task or a small request and is capable of generating a unique and often seemingly plausible and much larger output, right? It generates content. It is a content generator. And most of us are in the creative space, right? We are creatives by nature. We generate content, right? So I think there's the dual opportunities for how can we leverage this and how will it replace us, right? I think there's kind of two sides to that coin, and it's an interesting conversation. And so generative AI and FileMaker, right? Generative AI not going away. There's significant interest and momentum behind it. And the next 5 years, I think, are going to bring us change that we can only begin to imagine. We will hopefully start to begin to imagine that in this conversation here today, so I can note it all down and give my customers smarter answers the next time they ask me. So yeah, where might we leverage these artificial intelligences? And I think just as importantly, where must we maintain our human intelligences in this process? So that's kind of the level setting presentation here of what I'm hoping to talk about. And then I've created a series of kind of questions and prompts that I want to use to talk about it. So let me just dive right into the first one. And you're going to see here, these are going to kind of start with a statement or supposition on my part, and then I'm very interested in people weighing in. So I think that generative AI, and for the purpose of brevity, I have shortened that to GAI. Generative AI will become normative in certain tools and processes. And an example I would give is, in fact, Microsoft's use of it in Bing and Teams, but I think that is very much just the start of where we're headed, right? So where does it make sense for us to leverage generative AI to keep up, right? And by to keep up, I just mean the simple, obvious statement of, if your competitor is successfully leveraging generative AI and you are not, that is potentially a disadvantage. Where does it make sense, however, to avoid generative AI, to differentiate? Because if your competitor is leveraging generative AI and the generative AI isn't very smart, well, then you can probably differentiate yourself by not using generative AI for that thing and maybe win the business, do it better, help your customer be superior to the other customer or the other, their competitor, right? So that's the opening question I would like to pose. Where does it make sense to leverage it? Where does it make sense to avoid it? What do we think?
I have an answer.
Yes, Eric.
So
your name is Eric, by the way.
Oh yes,
I happen to know that.
My name is Eric. I also happen to know that.
Steve, you want to open up your camera?
Oh yes, let me switch my camera. hold on a second here. There we go.
So, this is Eric. I think a place where it would make a lot of sense to use it is, well, I can think of two examples. One is where you've got a big complex system where there's, multiple layered and compounded processes, and everything works except like 0.01% of the time, there's this weird edge case that keeps happening. And customers like, but why did this happen? And it's happening on a regular basis, but it's such a small percentage of the time. It is very laborious for a human to dig into all of that data and compare all the values of the fields and the processes that run to try to figure out what constellation of events resulted in this incorrect thing happening. So I think using generative AI to help analyze the large data sets and the accompanying code in a system could really help debug it and identify where a hole in the logic is, or, oh, this thing happened because a user put in this unexpected value. Maybe that was dumb of them, or maybe it was just unexpected. So I think that's one area. The other area is in a mature, complex system. We've got a customer who's got a very complex transactional system, and you want to know the answer to the question, what does this engine that we've built, that multiple people have built over a period of time, what does it actually do? If I put in these inputs, what are the outputs? Because you want to double check that it indeed is doing all the right stuff. Perhaps you want to go through and regression test all the, regression test everything and all of the various edge cases, but code keeps, being tweaked and changed. It would be nice to have, leverage the AI to essentially read the code and then in English language terms, tell you, here's what happens. Here's when you put in X, Y happens. And effectively have it read and comprehend all of the code and all the rules for you, rather than having to have a person who understands the entirety of a massive complex system.
Okay, so just to sum, I think you said looking for differences in large data sets or outcomes, and then essentially kind of a code cheat sheet, like those little books we used to buy in college that helped us read a novel in 10 pages,
Right.
so we could pass the test. Kind of
Yeah, tell me what the
Plus
plot
notes.
is,
right. Read code and explain it to me.
Yeah.
All right, Dennis,
Oh, he's muted.
on mute. Dennis, you're on mute.
Sorry.
There he is.
There were two other things in the news this week that I think bring us progressively closer to FileMaker than the military example. I'm not sure if you heard of them, but I'll just briefly mention. The first one was a story about some attorneys who used AI to document case references in some lawsuit. And it turned out that the cases just didn't exist at all. And apparently what the judge did was he assigned his clerks to research these particular references and found out that they just were totally artificial. And the other one was just a couple of days ago when Adobe announced that the next edition of Photoshop will have some kind of AI built into it.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder if in our community, in our world of FileMaker, we have been dealing with these low-code tools ever since the very beginning of FileMaker. For example, a script was intended to do certain things for us that we would otherwise have to write code for, or a field definition. And obviously later on, we've gotten to things like add-ons. And I wonder if there will be AI tools that somehow do the kinds of things that are generally desirable, or if we're going to be like writing them from scratch and dealing with the same consequences as the lawyers who had some fake legal references.
Yeah, like layouts, for instance, right? How
Right.
many times do we have to redefine what a pretty straightforward best practice method is for laying out demographic information, for instance, right? Stuff like that.
Yes.
Ray.
Good morning. There's so much going on, as you said. I've been trying to read Ben's Bytes, an AI newsletter, and it's pretty overwhelming. But this morning there was an article in the Wall Street Journal. I just posted the link to it about some of the worries. This kind of bears on what we're talking about. The headline is AI is writing code now for companies that is good and bad. And here is a paragraph that sort of frames the issue. However, some IT executives say that lowering the barrier for code creation could also result in growing levels of complexity, technical debt, and confusion as they try to manage a ballooning pile of software. And so the operative word there is technical debt. Some fear that eventually all of this chatbot written code might be somewhat inferior, and it's just a time bomb ticking in the big pile of software that you own that someday will have to be dealt with. And that is, I guess, technical debt in code is not a new term, but they're kind of pointing out that that may apply to this new generative AI period. Thank you.
Yeah,
One thing that,
I think that's
sorry.
right. Go ahead.
I wanted to get
several,
oh,
who's next?
So go ahead, Doc.
Several months ago, when I first got introduced to ChatGPT by my son-in-law, who's a professor in IT, I had an interesting experience. I thought to myself, let's see what kind of thing they can find out, and I asked it to write my biography based on publicly available information. And it came up with something that was complete and total fiction. And so I refined the thing and I said, okay, Steve Willis or Mark Stevens Willis, born on my birthday. And it came up with a completely different set of complete fiction. And then I said, Mark Stevens Willis, born on my birthday in El Paso, Texas. And it came up with yet a third complete fiction. So the thing that causes me to be really squeamish about the whole thing is, how do we know whether it's, and it goes back to that thing about the legal cases. How do we know that what it's giving us is not complete total BS?
Yep.
I want to go back to what Eric was talking about earlier, specifically about software development and testing stuff out, what went wrong. It might have been some interest to some people, but AWS actually have a product called Amazon Detective. And it's an AI machine learning product that goes through and explicitly finds the root cause of things going wrong. Now, we're not necessarily talking about your application in the sky, but the entire system, but it's designed to get at the root cause. So I thought that was an interesting point that you made, Eric. I wish we could apply it to FileMaker at this point, but you know.
Yeah. Well, so I think that's interesting. The common theme I hear here is there's some potential interesting usefulness, and we better make sure that we're curating the results, or that we are checking the work of these potentially useful processes. Lynette, I see that you've got your hand raised there for the room. Who is wanting to say something? And then I'll grab you, Bob, just right after that.
Hey, so Rob Trammell here in the symphony. So to address the gentleman who is talking about AI writing code, I think that brings up like I've followed several content creators who have used AI to generate code, and they just plug it in. You know, they say, write me an app that does this and this, and they plug it in. And when there are bugs, they copy the code back to the AI and they say, identify and correct all of the bugs in this code. And then it does it, and they go and paste it back in, and then they have an app that works. So I think like using AI, like AI could be used to solve the technical debt problem. So like if we get like a FileMaker 7 file for some reason, and we need to bring it up to FileMaker 2023, we could technically plug the code in and say, you know, write me up like an XML representation of this file so that it's compatible with FM 2023. So I think that's one way that we could actually use it. So that's
Interesting idea. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, Bob, I promised. You're on mute though. Unmute yourself. There we go.
All right, perfect. Okay, so we have a company that is doing about 30,000 installations a year. I'm talking like flooring installation for big box store. And so we have a lot of information coming at us all the time. We've got emails, we've got our people entering information in directly at their keyboard, and we've got SMS messages coming in. We've got all our jobs come in and go out, a lot of JSON transactions. So we decided about a month ago to try using OpenAI's API to grab this information and take the role of a useful assistant. Post job, our people call the customer and follow up on things. And we found it to actually be quite workable. I've got a little robot button that I call the Brobot in FileMaker that they can press, and it will submit all the information that it gathers up on those jobs to OpenAI's GPT 3.5 Turbo. And I use the completions API, and it actually does a good job. It sifts through the information and provides a synopsis of this customer said that they liked everything about the job, but maybe they had a problem with cleanup after the job, things like that. So we found it to be quite useful. Secondly, as far as coding, I use Copilot, and I've used ChatGPT to help me as well on some of my Python coding, because we are looking at training some large language models. using Llama, that sort of thing, on industry specific documents. And I think it's a huge boost in our ability to sift through a lot of requirements that are placed on us by our vendors, to know when we're doing the right thing and when we're not, with a lot less research than we had to do before. So I'm looking forward to this whole thing just becoming more of an assist, not taking anybody's job for sure, not mine. But anyway, that's it. That's my take on it. It's a great assistant.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. So I really want to move on to a couple other questions, but Gerard has had their hand up for a bit. So go ahead.
Well, I just want to say that I was listening to what Bob had to say and what Doc had to say as far as looking at the data that's within your FileMaker solution to come up with results or analysis about how your processes are doing in your business, as far as like your construction company or whatever it might be, or where they're seeing stuff like that, so they can come up with synopsis or ideas that might help that customer do better service or sell more goods. You know, putting those types of things together to look at the huge amount of data that we have stored in FileMaker to make analysis about the past and what could be seen in the future. That's where kind of my interest is in this, and stuff like that, because it would be nice to do that. You know, one of the things I had is we have places in here where we have literally maybe thousands of pictures along with text information. Being able to look at those pictures, being able to look at that text information, and probably even putting together, you know, clicking a thing that can create a documentation documentation that can be provided to the customer about, you know, we have a vertical solution for pool construction. And so you've got all the hardware that goes in there, all the materials that go in there, all the different specifications, and being able to see what's going on in your business as far as what you're selling, what could be the future and stuff like that. So that's my interest in this type of AI. I think that's, you know, looking at what the data that we have in FileMaker, because we have a huge amount of data.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. You know, customers always want reports, but they often have a difficult time telling you what report they want until after the fact, at which point then you have to go build it, and it's too late. So what if you could have a little bit smarter assistant looking for interesting observations, trends, exceptions, things of that nature, and surfacing things that you aren't having to do on your own. All right, I'm going to
have you just one other thing. Have you seen that ad on TV? I don't know. It's an ad where they're promoting this AI type of thing in the aquatics area, where just general people are taking underwater pictures and they submit it to a location for research for this organization. I don't know what it is, but you know, this is kind of like that. And you got, you know, like I had a customer that they have an HVAC thing, and then they were taking pictures before, during, and after everything, you know, and just, you know, what does the picture see that I'm missing? You know, what does the AI see what I'm missing?
Probably a pharmaceutical.
I like it. Okay, so I think that actually blends into the next kind of area of conversation that I was interested in, and that is that I think it's logical for us to look for kind of high volume, low value tasks to offload to the AI, right? And we identified some of those just in our conversation here, where we've got large data sets that we want to sort through, and we really can't afford to use humans to do it, or don't want to afford to, right? And I think I'm very excited about that and interested in that. I'm also interested in, and I wonder if we could come up with some stuff kind of in the opposite quadrant, right? Where might, and of course, it may still be a big data set, but what might be a low volume, high value application for AI, for generative AI, with our FileMaker systems? What do we think?
I think in terms of,
And your name is?
oh, my name is Brian.
Hey.
I am
Hi,
here
Brian.
in Harmonic at our international headquarters. As far as FileMaker goes, I think one of the struggles Claris or just the platform is going to have as far as adopting it versus a lot of other places in the coding space is that it's not a compiled language. There's a lot of things that I've fed into ChatGPT, literally just copied and pasted it into Xcode, and the compiler checks it, and everything's good to go. And there's not a good way in much of FileMaker to take the results and get them into FileMaker to actually try it out. Rob mentioned XML, which I think is probably going to be the most direct way of being able to very quickly get an AI result and then try it out.
Yeah, from like a code writing perspective,
right?
Right.
Because it doesn't know.
Yeah.
There's no way to paste a script into the script workspace. There are some dialogues where let statements could be written. Anything where you can type in just actual text, but you can't tell it, hey, iterate this layout, give me this same layout, but modify it, put a sidebar on it, or make 3 columns equally spaced. There's no way for it to talk to the layout engine to actually implement those things. So that's going to slow it down unless the XML representation of said layout could, but there's no way right now to really paste that in and see the results to iterate over, or hey, give me 5 variations of a layout. I want to see which one I like the best.
All right, so I'm gonna reshare my screen here and say that you've actually jumped ahead and asked a question that I didn't ask yet, but in fact, I think is a good question, right? You're a product manager at Claris. How do you incorporate generative AI into the platform, right? So one clear and obvious pathway and answer is you give us an easier way to text in, text out, right? That kind of gets back to getting the patch tool to work better, completing the XML language infrastructure for the database definition and so forth. Yeah, interesting. Dennis, what are you thinking?
The one that comes to mind for me is in the financial area. I'm sure everybody knows who Dun & Bradstreet is, but in a lot of industries, there are companies that specialize in what they call peer-to-peer credit reporting. And the effort is always to detect trends that are going on with individual prospective customers to find out whether they're really capable of qualifying for the credit that you want to extend to them. So that kind of thing is usually done on the basis of a subscription, where a company will subscribe to a service that gathers information on their behalf, but that information is only as good as what the other companies report in about what their accounts receivable is, and if it's possible that AI is capable of doing it with more accuracy and more speed, you can make instant credit decisions. I used to rely on actual human beings. My peers in the business I used to be in would talk to one another. And if somebody said to me, watch out for so-and-so, I hear he's going through a divorce and he's just lost his home, well, it may affect his business credit too.
Interesting. Yeah, so just to try and abstract that a little bit, the notion of, again, using the AI's ability to rapidly crunch a tremendous amount of data and look for patterns that, interestingly, may be different patterns than, like you're pointing out, that different patterns than another service or business has identified as relevant. Maybe the ability to kind of interact with and train the AI on the fly to an extent.
Right, and one of the trends that was sometimes detected had to do with second source vendors, where a company can't necessarily change who their landlord is from month to month, but if they have more than one source for a particular inventory item that's important to them, and they owe that vendor so much that that vendor's cutting them off, they decide, well, we're just going to buy from a different vendor, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to pay those bills.
Yeah. Awesome. Taylor, I see your hand up, and then I'll grab Bob. So go ahead.
Okay, this is Taylor Sharp. As far as where I see FileMaker is right now, you can't say, write a script and be able to paste it into the workspace, as Brian was pointing out. So obviously those are tools that, Claris can improve on to add that in. But we do have the ability right now to make API calls to like ChatGPT and get responses back, and for us to write a script to handle that, to do different things with customers' data or the user interface. So we do have some tools there. Along those lines, Claris could connect more friendly towards various AI tools out there as for us to be able to connect to. And then of course, what's the difference between AI and ML? It's really, to me, it's the same thing. We already have the ability to use ML tools in FileMaker, and if you get the ML tool, you can put it in a container and you can make calls to it. But I actually see it's easier if we're able to call APIs out that someone else is maintaining the ML, and continuing to improve on it than something I put specifically in here. So I see we have some tools. Obviously, Claris has a lot of ways to improve how FileMaker can interact with it. But I'm already looking at ways of how to just using the API call to ChatGPT to say, hey, how can my customers do some things to optimize. For example, I've got a client that's trying to optimize what they should order for next month to keep certain inventory levels and things like that. So, I see, if I can write a program that sends the data in and says, read this and tell me what I should order to maintain a 90-day inventory next month, and it spits it back, and then I can tell it to go out into FileMaker and populate the fields and say, here are the POs I need to send out to these vendors, go. And that's what I see.
Yeah, I love it. All right, Bob, I said grab you next. Go for it. We can't hear you, Bob. Sorry. Doesn't show on mute, but we're not hearing you.
Now
it shows on mute. No audio. Okay, sorry about that.
Were you talking to me or Bob Trammell?
Bob Trammell. Yeah, Bob okay. Trammell. All right, Alex, I saw your hand, and then Ray.
So I'm having trouble deciphering if this is processing AI or generative AI, but I could see just any point of which you need text for end users. Especially like you may write a layout that assumes that someone understands English, but that's not necessarily a valid assumption to carry universally. On the Claris end, we could use a lot more documentation on the product itself to just, how simple would it really be? And maybe I should assume that actually it's pretty hard. What if we had twice as much? Or even just doing different language versions of the software itself. I think they dropped support for like Swedish, and the recommended alternative was just install the English language version.
Yeah, most people in Sweden speak English. That's okay. All right, Ray, what are you thinking?
I want to kind of go back to, I don't think this audience is very likely to underestimate AI, but we might. I have just posted a PDF of a story of just a great experience I've had starting from ground zero and letting ChatGPT write Python code for me. I knew nothing about Python and still don't, but it was an absolutely eye-opening experience. And what I'm talking about is, yes, I would give text commands to chat, very general text commands to do something. And of course, then when I'd run the code, I'd get an error. But I give that code back to Chat GPT and it fixes the code. It is,
Right.
unless you've done it, you just don't have an appreciation for how terribly intelligent these LLMs already are. And there's already APIs out there now that are writing web page. You describe the web page that you want and it writes the code. So
Yeah. I think that's a really good observation.
Check my article and you'll see the basis for my enthusiasm. I'm absolutely blown away. I'm 92 years old and Chat AI is just revitalizing my mindset.
Wow. Wow, that's cool. As I think about it, how often do we run into a problem, a code problem, a technical problem, right? And we'll do a Google search and we'll look for an answer on Stack Overflow or wherever. Well, part of what we've got to recognize is that these models have already consumed all of it. They already know all of it, right?
Exactly.
Now, all of it that they know may in some cases be right and may in some cases be wrong, but they're already a long ways ahead of where we're starting if we're clicking Google and clicking on the first link, second link, the third link.
We're all playing catch up. I truly believe that.
Yeah, we are. John.
Yes. So this touches to some of things that people have already addressed, but one is like on your product manager at Claris, and how do you incorporate generative AI into the platform? For now, most of the companies that are having success in implementing AI into their platforms is they have what you call area embedded AI.
Yep.
They have embedded it into their applications or their platforms in a way that people don't necessarily have to go outside to type in the command and then import what they're doing.
Yep.
They're just directly typing their prompts directly into the app. For example, like in the upcoming updates in Photoshop, you just type in, I want to replace this selected part with this, whatever you want it to be. Or like Microsoft doing with Bing is you're typing directly into Bing the prompt, and then you can also modify the prompts directly from there. And then the other thing that was discussed was the actual output of what ChatGPT is providing to people. It's the output is going to depend on the quality of the input, the quality of the prompt that you give it. Some people have been having success with trying different things, like varying what they ask it, and then like people mentioned, if it gives you a wrong code, then give it the actual the code that it gave you and ask it to fix it. So having that level of understanding, if I tell it this, then I might expect this as an output, and also expecting to know that you have to verify or determine whether whatever it responded was accurate or sometimes it lies.
Yeah.
That's been known as a quality of the generative AI.
Well, it was trained by humans. So,
All right, Bob Trammell, did you get your mic working?
I think so.
Yes, we did. All right, we can hear you.
Yeah, we were fiddling around with a bunch of configurations yesterday for this meeting. And well, anyway, whatever. I did have something that's not necessarily programming, but ought to be in our thinking process. When this first hit the market, of course, it was called Chat GPT because they used a chat bot as the front end to the large language model. And you know, at this point, I don't think we remember that the first part of it was that it was so conversational. So you start with a prompt, it gives you a response, and then it remembers both your prompt and your conversation with it, and you don't have to re-explain what you asked in the first place. You can just say, yeah, make that shorter, or make it, you know, one of the classic ones is make it as if I'm angry or whatever. And it will carry on the conversation. One application I think that we all face with our users is we've written them every conceivable report that humanity could ever want, except the next one they're going to ask you for. And what these chatbot or this chat construct lets you do is to tell us something like, hey, I need that report, but please add a column about phone numbers, or please include the phone number in the report. And it can go out and create a new report in the style of what you've been presenting it, but with the additional information. I think, I know in my career, I've gone crazy just making one-off spreadsheets for users. And it takes as much effort to do the 10th one as it did the 11th one, right? Or to do the 11th one. And no thought, it just needs to be ground out. And that would be something good that an AI could do. There was a FileMaker DevCon in Rome, I think, and they had a guy on who had used, this was before Chat GPT, I think, but he had used an API to send queries, conversational queries into FileMaker. FileMaker maintained all the data, it had all of its own tables, etc. But based upon what you prompted, this AI interface, it would pull the right fields and generate a pretty decent report. And I think that's, I mean, we're all coders at heart, but that's an aspect of user support that I think it could be a game changer. If users could get anything they wanted from their database without having to get a programmer to do it, I think that would be something attractive.
All right, I think that pivots nicely to kind of the last pairing of questions that I think we're going to have time for today. I have more, but you know, it's
Did you guys lose me?
We could talk endlessly about this. So how will generative AI replace us in the next 5 years? And I of course, I don't mean replace us as humans. I mean replace us as functions that we're doing. And then secondarily, how will it fail to replace us, right? Where will we still need to be adding value? So what do we think here? Where this is heading? I think we've talked about some things already, but let's try for a quick list. What do we think we're going to stop learning how to do pretty quick? You know, like none of the kids can write by hand anymore, right? Because the thumbs have replaced the pen. So you know what is going to be the analog to that in the software engineering space?
It's going to help us iterate very, very quickly. I've done some experimenting with it where I described an iOS app written in Swift, and got a basic layout, a scaffolding, that was pretty accurate, and I would just follow up with little details and not having to re-explain layout every time, but just like a conversation like you would have with a designer, a UI designer. And once I got that looking pretty close to what I wanted, I said, okay, I need a make this in Swift UI, not Swift, or make it in Flutter. And it would take what we had already been talking about, and it would just regenerate the same app with Swift UI instead of UIKit. Or make this into a web app or something like that. So being able to iterate, that's really costly for a person to do. Or I want to try out an idea. I want to try out a slightly different data model or a different set of relationships, but I don't want to destroy this relationship graph and process. And it's just very, very time consuming for somebody to do all that work just to see, I don't want to use that.
Yeah.
And you can very, very quickly iterate with ChatGPT on stuff like that.
I think another place where it is likely to replace us is in the endeavors where you are modifying a code base to a new version or a new framework or something. So two specific examples is, a few years ago, we moved a customer's code base from raw PHP to Laravel, which is a PHP framework. Well, we had like one or two people sit there and go through that whole PHP code base and convert it to Laravel. Well, that's something that an AI should fairly easily be able to do. I think another one is
can we pair with that though, that what it will fail to do is know the AI did the right thing. Right? I feel like at least within the next 5 years, the burden remains on us to kind of validate.
Right.
I mean, when I say that, like the business result right then, or do you mean like the code?
Yes.
Like taking accountability of the mistakes that you made. Like I don't see it in the next 5 years as being very confident that everything that AI gives us is accurate. And for a business, I'd want to know if I make this decision based on what AI told me, then who do I go to when that decision doesn't pay off?
So we're still going to have to own, just like, I've had a few buck stops here, conversations where I own the mistakes that I make and my company makes on my behalf. We're going to have to own the mistakes that we leverage AI for and turn out to be wrong.
Right. But, if we can shortcut and, for instance, have the AI do the initial work of updating a code base to move from PHP 7.4 to PHP 8, then we can spend our human time testing and validating that it did the right thing, rather than spending our time updating the code base and replacing, deprecated functions and stuff. That kind of grunt work.
Yeah, our back to a FileMaker example. I don't know what this PHP thing is that you keep talking about. The proverbial FMP URL model changed from version 18 to version 19. If the AI is smart enough to understand the contextual implication of whether that change is relevant or not, review the entire code base and point out the places where I might need to update something about the scripting. That certainly is within the realm of conceivability, I think, within that time frame. I'm going to call on Gerard again. Go for
it. Thank you very much. you're all talking about doing coding and doing the programming and doing everything like that. And what what is still the biggest problem that we're going to have is how do we get that data into FileMaker? And if we don't make that improvement, all the improvements that we do into generating the code and stuff like that isn't going to do much good. So we still have to look at how can we make that the person that's sitting behind the keyboard out in the field gathering the data, being able to put that in there in an easy way. And we're talking about the code here. We also have to think about how can I use something that the customer sees at when he's looking at FileMaker and using it to input data into FileMaker to make that process easier. And that's in my business, the biggest problem is getting data in. If you don't put the data in, all this other programming and all the AI stuff isn't going to work. So that's where a discussion on how can I use AI to get better data input and stuff like that might be of something of interest too. And that might be along the chat GPT thing, as far as you're having the conversation with FileMaker or with your application, and it's gathering and getting questions for you, but it's smart enough to know where to put that data at. So it's just another idea that I have there that, I have an interest in more of the user experience. How do I get that data in there for the application? So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really smart observation, Gerard. And I'm going to coattail on that one and say that I honestly think that a low volume, high value opportunity would be, and then kind of going back to what Bob was talking about, would be using conversational AI to help our users write / communicate / message better, right? Whether it's from a tech support standpoint, from a documentation reporting, recording what happened, what you meant, et cetera. If we can, a lot of people really have difficulty writing or frankly stringing sentences together that other people understand. Me too, sometimes when I'm trying to talk too fast. But what if we could use some of this conversational AI to help say, is this what you mean? Okay, with that prompt, is this a fair representation of what you're trying to say? Yes, commit, right? And then that goes into the whatever it is, whether it's a trouble ticket or a description field or whatever.
Yeah, delete all the superlatives, delete all the berries and
all the owns. Yeah. Lynette, I saw the hand up in your room next. Go ahead in that room.
Hey, this is Daisy. So I wanted to go back to the where it's going to fail. And this kind of goes off of what Eric was saying about the updating code base to a new framework or version. And I was going to go more based off of the FileMaker side versus the PHP. And with FileMaker, we're working with a software that another company has produced, right? So how is the AI going to know if FileMaker or Claris itself has introduced a bug into this system where it used to work this way? Now with this new version, it's now introduced a bug, and it's just is it going to identify that bug that we need to code around? What are the implications of that? So it's kind of more, you still need a human to know what those things are.
That's a really good point. Yeah, definitely in the FileMaker space, and like any compiled language, compilers just in general are very, very good, but that's not what we're working with FileMaker. So there's going to be, struggles basically trying to integrate it. I think, where some people are hitting the ground running in other languages, even if you get a result back that's less than accurate or actually has bugs in it. You can generally just paste it in, and whatever your IDE it's just going to start throwing flags on things because the compiler is not going to be wrong. Chat GPT might be wrong,
right.
but the compiler won't be.
So I'm going to coattail on these comments and say that that is certainly something that Claris could continue to do, is as it becomes more and more clear how some of these AI tools digest information and are able to use it effectively, publish that information. When you make a code change, publish it in a way that it can be digested so that as we are using these AI tools to review our code and so forth, they understand the change that you made and the context of the change that you made. And they can help us be smart about finding implications for that change in our code. Ray, I saw your hand next.
Thank you. Going back to my limited experience with ChatGPT and Python, I wanted to pick up on the idea that I didn't realize at first. Chat remembers what we've been talking about, going back for several days on individual chats. They are preserved in the workspace. And another thing was, I didn't know anything about Python. And as I was in telling it what I wanted done, it said, well, we're going to have to bring in this function at the head of the code to do what you want. And then I got to a point where it said, hey, this would probably work a lot better if we brought in some libraries. But libraries are only available in SQL 3XXX. Do you have access to SQL XXX? So chatbot is monitoring what I'm doing. It remembers what we've been talking about, and it is going to not only build your code, but monitor it day by day. Thank you.
Very interesting. Jean.
So I had another one on how it replaces us in the next five years.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily not sure if we're going to be there in the next 5 years, but the reason why it's being successful today is the way it's easy for people to interact with it, right? It's making it easy for people to interact with computers. Now, the reason why we have these other platforms like FileMaker or these other applications that we use is because we want to be able to make computers do things for us, right? So with what Ray just said, it being able to remember what we've asked it, right? And being able to make it easy for people to interact with computers, it might reduce the need for people to have these multiple various applications, but then be that central way of communicating with computers. So for example, if I want to tell my computer or to create something on the calendar, I might not need the calendar application. I might just say, ChatGPT, hey, remind me to do this next week. Or if I'm looking at something that I've asked in increments, what is the sum of these things that have been happening within the company in the last 3 months? So the ability to combine all the information that it has and then being able to communicate with the person in a conversational manner.
Yeah, so that's really interesting observation. And of course, Siri and Hey Google and so forth have been trying to do this for some time now, right? That they become the application. They do a pretty clumsy job at it so far. And most of us still go to the application itself. But I think that's also a potential feature. I think this gets back to some of what Gerard was getting at as well, is give us a way to let the AI be the interface, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe what we don't need to do is present all data on a layout where, especially with mobile and things like that, on a layout where you can click into a field and so forth. Maybe let me simplify my interface, and use an assistant that I can ask the question and get the answer from.
Yeah, versus developing a very complicated layout logically that has to account for all the ways you think the customer might use it, and all the branching and just complicated inputs. It could just store as more or serve more as a data store. It would still have some UI, of course. You got to be able to interact with it, but maybe not as much, getting out into the weeds, coding wise.
Yeah, so that will give it the ability to just in a conversational manner, give it a prompt. Hey, I want to record this information, and it will know the right place to store that information in a way that it's going to be able to use it later.
All right, we're at about 80 minutes here. So I want to ask one kind of final question, quick answers here. How are you feeling about AI? What do people think? How are you feeling about AI? Ray, how are you feeling about AI?
I am terribly excited. I think we're underestimating it. I'm sure there's some dangers out there, but we got to get our toe in the water. We got to get in there using it to find out and understand what's going on.
Taylor, how are you feeling about AI?
Well, I'm focused mostly on the practical end of things, and the only things I've played with is trying to make I've just proved that I could make an API call to it and get an answer. And then I have been contemplating how am I able to, give it data and ask it to do some things that it relates to my clients. And, the example I talked to you about before is I'm trying to figure out how I can say, here's my inventory and I want to maintain this inventory level, how much I need to order for next month. Those are practical things I can do for a client right now. I know there's all types of things way off in the future that, we can get at, but I'm very much focused on what can I do right now with current FileMaker and make something better for my current clients.
Yeah. And I would say that personally, my feelings echo that. I'm looking for those practical, applicable examples right now where we can engage it. Bob, productively and actively using generative AI with your company. How are you feeling about it so far?
It does a really good job at sifting through a lot of information and providing a sentiment analysis. So I feel pretty good about it. I do want to be master of it so that it can't fire me. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to program your AI and score it so that firing you would cause it to lose all the points so that it doesn't want to do that.
I still know where all the bodies are buried. I'm not telling anyone.
Dennis, how are you feeling about AI?
In a word, trepidation. I didn't want to waste the meeting time telling you an anecdote that I sent you in an email, but I certainly don't want to be at the bleeding edge of this because of the likelihood that there are going to be errors.
Yep. I think the certainty that there will be errors.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like not wanting to install the next version of FileMaker server until a couple of weeks have gone by.
Years.
Great. Lynette, anybody in your room want to chip in on how they're feeling about AI?
Anybody? Oh,
To say something.
all right, go ahead first,
Go
Rob,
for it.
and then Daisy.
Are we live?
Yeah, you're live. Go ahead.
So I'm excited about AI. I make no apology if you've heard me say this before, but I really subscribe to Steve Jobs's outlook on computers that they are the bicycle of the mind. So it's kind of, I look at AI kind of in the same way that it's, some people will take it and they'll get on it and they'll like try to ram it into a wall or something. They'll do something dumb with it. And then other people are going to get on it and figure out how to use it to carry them like 5 miles down the road.
Right.
So
I'm going to extend your metaphor and call AI the motorcycle of the mind.
yeah, basically. So we need, I mean, we definitely need to learn how to ride, so to speak. Like we need to figure out how it works and how we can use it going forward. And I mean, it's really only going to be as good as the people using it. So it's not really that it's going to replace us. It's more that there are things that we do now that we've had to learn how to do because the tools haven't been sufficient to do those tasks for us. So I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that's where it's going. That it's gonna take a bunch of menial things that we have to do every day off the table so that we can focus on like bigger and better things, so to speak.
Yeah, I sure hope so. Daisy, what are you thinking?
I kind of want to echo a little bit of what Rob said, but you know, I'm excited to play with it. Am I excited to put it in practice every day? No, I'm weary, right? Because I feel I still need to know the code that it's spitting out to be able to say if it did the right thing or not, right? So I still need to be knowledgeable enough to know if it did the right thing or the wrong thing. So I think if we can give it the dumb stuff that we, you know, the repetitious stuff that we already are doing that we don't want to do, that we spend our time doing more cool and complicated and fun stuff, I think that will help there. But I'm not ready to hand over the complications of some of the systems that we have and trusting that the AI can do what we want it to do.
Yeah, yeah. You gotta still be the mom.
Yeah.
No advocating there. All right, well, awesome. I feel imminently better prepared to have the conversation with my customer the next time around. So thank you all for this. I've really enjoyed it, and look forward to next month's FMPUG. I think is fall, if I recall correctly. So
All who is in Germany.
Taylor, back to you.
Okay, everybody, it's good to have everybody here this month. We'll be back next month for Paul, who's I think he's talking about project management. Anyway, it should be a good presentation. I look forward to it. I bet he'll have learned a few things over in Germany this month, so it will be good to be here. So we look forward to seeing everybody next month. And Steve, thank you for a very interesting meeting. Take care, everybody.
Great meeting. Thank you.